So in this evening's practice, we're going to look a little bit or really sense more. We're not going to look at them as such, sense more the bones in our body. So our focusing on our bones or our muscles or our skin or our breathing are all possibilities, of course, in yoga. And they can have quite a different experiential effect. And I often find focusing on my bone structure quite useful in terms of relaxation, and also quite useful in terms of drawing my attention to a sense of solidity in my body and structure and support, which are all things that are potentially very calming and useful right now in the crisis where maybe we feel there's a lack of certainty around us and there's a lot of things we don't know. So connecting with something very kind of obvious in our body, something that we can actually see our bones under the skin. Like, for example, we can see our knuckles under our skin. It's quite obvious, clear. We can feel it. We can touch it more than, for example, focusing on the subtle energy body, the pranic body. That's much more ephemeral and useful in a different way. And so the bones are obviously part of our skeleton, which you could say is our internal scaffolding, and held together by muscles and connective tissue. On their own, our bones wouldn't stand up, so they do rely on the interaction with our connective tissue and our muscles. However, if we learn to rely on our bones and have good alignment in our skeleton when we stand or when we do things like cat pose or downward dog, then less is required from our muscles. So we can do things often in a more effortless way when we get a good sense of our bone structure and how we can align our bones with each other. So in the lying down posture, that might start by being aware of the bend at your knees. So I'd like you to start with your knees bent, if that feels okay for your back. And of course, you can always straighten your legs if something is triggered in your back and you just aren't comfortable like this. That's perfectly fine. You can still do a lot of the practice, and sometimes it changes after a few minutes of resting as well. So you might find it's uncomfortable initially to straighten your legs or bend your knees, and then when you've done the opposite thing for a few minutes, you can then try again, and sometimes it's changed. So in any case, with your knees bent, you can then look for with your body, with the sense of awareness of your body, a position for your feet and your legs where it's very easy to kind of stand your lower legs up as they are. So your lower legs are a bit like standing up legs. And you might have a felt sense of your knees being more or less above your ankles. Maybe your feet are slightly forward of the knees. It doesn't matter. What matters is that it feels easy. It feels easy to have your legs in this position. And you don't need to use your thigh muscles to stay up there. So if you notice your thigh muscles need to contract and are active to stop your legs from flopping over, then it's worth moving maybe your feet away, a bit further away from you, or your feet a bit wider and allowing your knees to lean in towards each other, creating a kind of triangle shape. So everyone's hip joints are a bit different, and that's why there's no kind of exact position that I can give you that is going to be the right one for you. It's really something you need to feel yourself. And then you can hopefully, once you find that position as best as you can hopefully have a sense of your heels on the ground, quite a strong bone in your heel, which is then covered by quite a lot of connective tissue. And then your Achilles tendon going up from there, quite solid. And then you can sense your ankles and your shins going up, meeting your knee joints. And then from your knee joints, your thigh bones going down into your hips. And then your hips are part of your pelvis. So your pelvis is resting on the ground. And you might feel your sacrum on the ground, which is at the back of your pelvis, the big bone between your lower back and your tailbone. So your tailbone is kind of just below the sacrum, and then your lumbar vertebrae are above, and in between there's a big triangular bone, and you might feel that on the ground. And sometimes that feels a little bit sensitive on a hard floor in particular, so it can be nice to have a cushion or a blanket there. So there can both be a sense that the weight of your legs is transferred from your knees down to your heels and from your knees down to your hips via the leg bones. And then the rest of your muscles in your legs and your feet can be relatively relaxed. Maybe you feel still a little bit of activity there. See if you can relax it as much as you can. And then you can make sure that your elbows are on the floor, and you might have your hands either on your torso or on the floor. Hands in any comfortable position. And then again, we've got some support then through the elbows and the shoulder blades for your arms to relax and for your shoulders to be able to let go. And then you've got the back of your head on the floor too, or a cushion, that's also fine. And feeling how the skull is supported. So you now have your feet on the ground, maybe just your heels if you've straightened your legs, your pelvis, your shoulder blades, your elbows and the back of your head. And then the spine between the base of the skull and the sacrum. And some of the parts of your spine will be on the floor and some won't. In fact, it might feel like there's very little of your spine on the floor right now between the head and the sacrum. Your lumbar curve might be away from the floor. The back of your neck, the nape of your neck is likely to curve away from the floor. There might be a bit of your thoracic spine at the back of your ribs that's on the floor. It depends a bit on the position of your shoulder blades. It might be more your shoulder blades that are taking your weight than your thoracic spine. And then having drawn our attention to the back of the body like this, we might already start to feel a little bit more restful, going into the depth of the body towards the ground. And then for the next few breaths, as you breathe in, you can allow your belly to soften, noticing your chest gently rising, your belly rising with the in-breath. And then on the out-breath, feeling the contact points that the back of your body makes with the ground. So breathing in, relaxing the front. Breathing out, releasing through the back, through the bones in particular. Inhaling, softening the front. Exhaling, releasing through the bones in the back of the body. And then paying attention to your breathing, I'd like to invite you to gently roll your head from side to side. And this could be a very small movement. And think of it as a movement to become aware of the back of your head rather than doing this for your neck. Rolling your head from side to side, what can you feel at the back of your head? You might feel a bit more if you're on a yoga block or a mat. And you get a bit more feedback from the ground than if you have a cushion. So notice how maybe the shape of the back of your head is. Does it feel smooth or a bit bumpy? And then bringing your head back to the center. And we'll do a very small movement I often do with my classes, so some of you will know this one. It's a movement of the lower back and the pelvis. Basically, what we're doing is on an out breath, going to flatten the lumbar curve towards the floor, and there'll be a slight tipping of the pelvis towards the lower back, or in other words, the tailbone will slightly kind of round up, but we're not lifting the hips. And then on the in-breath, going to increase the lumbar curve and roll the back of the pelvis towards the tailbone. So it's really a small movement, and we can think of it as flattening and arching the lower back. It's a bit like a mini cat pose lying on your back. So on the out breath, we're flattening the curve, and your pelvis will roll a little bit towards your lower back, and the tailbone will roll away from the floor very slightly. And then on the in-breath, arching the lower back, and the pelvis rolls towards the tailbone. And you get a bit more space between your lumbar curve and the mat. Now again, you can do this very small. Again, it helps to think of it as a movement to explore how the back of your pelvis feels in relation to the ground, rather than something that stretches your back. You can think of it as a tipping of the pelvis. And then I'd like you to also be aware of your head. So you might, not necessarily, but you might notice that your head moves in response. And you flatten your lower back, your chin might lift slightly and your head might roll towards the crown. And when you arch your lower back, your chin might come slightly down and your head will roll the other way. Don't worry if you can't feel that, but notice what if anything, is happening in your head and neck area. And then relaxing your back again and bringing attention to the back of your pelvis again. And this time we're going to be aware of a left to right movement. We're going to do a tiny twist, so you don't have to move your arms. They're okay if you've got your elbows bent and your hands on your chest. That's fine, because you're only going to move your knees a few centimeters from side to side, really a tiny bit. So you're just rocking very slightly from left to right on the back of your pelvis. If you fancy stretching your arms out to the side, you can, of course. But I'm encouraging you to keep those movements much, much smaller than you know you could make them. So again, thinking of this as an exploration of the back of the pelvis rather than a yoga twist. So you can feel your bones, and you can, on your out breaths, encourage yourself to allow your pelvis to be heavy. And our pelvises are quite heavy. The sacrum is one of the sort of most solid, dense bones in the body. Apparently it's the last bone to deteriorate after we've died. So it's very, very strong, and it's called the sacral bone because it was seen apparently in the ancient times as a kind of holy bone because it lasted such a long time. And then coming back to the center. And then straightening your legs out for a moment to notice how that now feels. And again, noticing the relationship between the back of your body and the floor, how those contact points are in touch with the floor. With straight legs, you might feel more weight is going down through your buttocks rather than your sacrum. And then still your elbows, your shoulder blades, your head, and of course the heels. And then you might like to interlace your fingers and stretch your arms up behind you. I hope you've got room, or you can go straight up towards the ceiling. Taking a nice deep breath in, stretching the front ribs, stretching through your feet, your toes. You can point your toes away from you, and then coming back, relaxing your arms, relaxing your legs. And then interlacing your fingers the way that feels a bit unusual. So still like a sort of prayer gesture, then interlace, but with your other thumb on top. So I usually interlace my fingers automatically and my left thumb is on top. So to do it this way, I would move all my fingers and my thumbs so my right thumb's on top. And then again, getting a nice stretch through your whole body, feeling the length of your body through your bones, from your heels to your fingers. Nice deep breath in and then exhaling, relaxing your arms. And then bending your knees again and bringing them in towards you. And taking your hands around your knees, front of your knees, your kneecaps. You can feel the structure of your knees via your hands. Maybe give them a little rub, a little massage. And then taking a bigger rock from side to side. Some of you might know this movement as little boat. And you can let your head roll in the opposite direction of your knees. And again, being aware of your pelvis, the back of your pelvis, the back of your head, and the rotation of the spine. Awareness of the ground. All of these awarenesses will help us to begin to settle our mind as well as our body, to unwind for the evening. And then coming back to the center, bringing your feet back down. And then do a little bit of bridge pose. So bringing your feet and your knees hip distance apart. And again, your arms could stay with your elbows on the floor if that's more comfortable. Maybe your hands on your rib cage. Knees bent, feet hip width apart. Or you can have your arms by your side with palms up or down. And then rolling the spine up and down a few times. And if you're feeling a little tired, you can keep it very small, just I call it the hammocky bridge. Not going very far, again, instead perhaps emphasizing the relationship between your spine rolling up and down and how that feels on the floor. Or you can go a bit higher, which will be a bit more effort and also a bit more energizing potentially. So maybe after the slow start to the class, you're starting to feel like you'd like to be a little bit active, that's fine. And if you're starting to feel, oh, actually I am quite tired, you can give in to it and just rest at any time or keep your bridge nice and low. You can feel the vertebrae that make up your spine moving, and some of them making contact with the ground some of the time. And some of them might never make contact with the ground in bridge, and that's fine. Simply notice how your spine moves in relation to the ground. And when you next roll back down, once more folding your knees in towards your chest. And then with your hands on your knees, again being aware of the structure of your knees. you can separate your knees and bring them back together, rotating your thigh bones in the sockets of your hips. Again, you can keep that movement very small. It's not about the size of the movement. Again, we can think of it more as a way of exploring how the back of our body moves on the floor. So how does the back of your pelvis feel? How does your lumbar curve, your lower back curve respond to this movement? You can go the other way if you haven't already. Very nice. And then bringing your knees back together in the center. And then slowly, with bent knees, lowering your feet to the ground, and notice what happens when your heels land. You can do this a couple of times if you like. So bringing your knees back up, and then noticing probably that when you lower your legs, your tummy muscles kick in quite a bit to resist gravity, so your feet don't just drop. The slower you do it, the more you'll notice it. And then when your heels land, that activity, that contraction in the tummy muscles can let go again, and you might have a deeper in-breath then. So you're likely to slightly be holding your breath when you lower your feet like that. So once the support of the bones is back, your feet are back on the ground, other parts of you can relax. And that's really that principle of how the muscles have to do less work if we use the support of the bones appropriately. Great. So then we can come to sitting. And you could sit on a chair for this bit, or you can sit on yoga blocks. 1 or 2 blocks, I usually have 1.5, or cushions. We're going to work a little bit actually with our hands. So once you're sitting fairly comfortably as you can, just take a look at our hands. So we can, it's quite nice, you can see my hands very big when I go near the camera. We can see the knuckles, you can see the nails, which are also kind of bone structure, similar material. You might be able to see some of the bones on your wrists. So these are obviously quite small and flexible structures. You can do the playing the invisible piano a couple of times and notice how versatile these digits are. And the thumbs can do circular motions, the opposable thumb, very useful. And then we can interlace our fingers and do a little movement here with our wrists, kind of creating a wave-like movement, and sometimes there's little creaks that we can hear, clicks and creaks. And you might have a sense, you might know that one of your hands is leading the other. It might be your dominant hand, for me it is. but not necessarily. So if you have a sense that your right hand is leading, see if you can stop and then let your left hand lead, and it will kind of be like you're going the other way. And it might suddenly be quite hard to compute. How do I do that? This one is really nice for repetitive strain injury from being on too many Zoom calls. If you're doing a lot of that for work, or gardening. Everyone's gardening at the moment, and DIYing. And then we can do the same thing with our palms away from us. So again, you might have a sense of one hand taking the lead. You can let it take the lead a few waves, and then letting the other hand take the lead. Lovely. And then we can shake our hands out as if shaking water off our hands. This hand washing we're doing, shake off the water. Lovely. And then we can bring the palms together really quite softly, so there's a bit of space between your fingers. Show you this way and that way. And then circling our hands, and you can kind of be quite random with this. And kind of noticing what feels quite nice, maybe for your wrists, your hands. Lovely. And then we'll cross our right arm over our left, around about the elbows, and then giving ourselves a hug. So wrapping our hands around our shoulders, and we can feel maybe some of the bone structure there, the collarbones, the top of the back of the shoulder blades maybe, and the muscles there. Give all that a bit of a massage, as well as stretch our upper back. And then letting our hands kind of settle somewhere where it feels quite comfortable, and lifting and lowering our elbows a couple of times. And releasing our arms and stretching our arms out to the side. You can have them a bit lower if you're a bit stuck for space. And then crossing the left arm over the right. Again, we can just have a little bit of a massage here. Kind of curious, so how are my shoulders this evening? What can I feel there? And then lifting and lowering the elbows a couple of times. Releasing the back. And then relaxing our arms again. And then for the next one, I'll just move my screen a little bit so you can see a bit more of me. I'm taking my hands out to the side, and my palms are facing forwards. And then I'm just going to wriggle my shoulders, paying attention to my shoulder blades. I sometimes describe this as trying to scratch the center of my upper back with the inner edges of my shoulder blades. Seeing if I can move my shoulder blades around, aware of my shoulder blades on my back. And they might feel a bit stuck. You might think, I don't know if I'm doing it right. Basically, palms forwards and wriggling the shoulders. Something will be happening there, even if we're not sure what. Lovely. And then we can relax that and Once more, interlace our fingers, and then we've probably done it in the way that's our habit, so then we can move all the fingers, so we're doing it the other way. And then stretching the hands away like this, palms facing into you, and letting your upper back round, letting your chin drop a little bit. And then releasing that. Great. And we're just going to do a couple of things on all fours. And if you feel like lying down again already because you're tired, of course you can. But if you would like to explore just a little bit of cat and downward dog and child, please join me. So, cat pose, got our hands on the floor, and we can get that sense of the shoulders being above the hands, so we're supporting ourselves through our bones. So you can just about see my shoulder, my arm being quite straight, and then you can see sometimes these screens are good. I can see my hips weren't quite above my knees, so making that kind of tabletop position. Some yoga schools call this tabletop. So right angles, nice support through the bones. And then we can do a cat stretch there whilst we pay attention to our weight releasing through our bones. And if your wrists aren't so comfortable, you can come down to elbow and forearm. So just demonstrating that on the camera as well. Again, finding a vertical line from your shoulder to your elbow. Cat. And then when you next come to the neutral cat, you tuck your toes under and lifting your knees, coming into downward dog. Go up and down a few times and be aware of the support of your bones. So again, that sense that there isn't really that much effort needed. There's obviously stretching happening. Really, we're very much supporting ourselves through the V shape of our arms and legs and spine in that pose. And then you can alternate with child pose, where we can place the weight of our head on the floor and kind of surrender completely to gravity. So a bit more effort in downward dog. And then less effort in child. And of course, if for some reason either of those postures is uncomfortable, maybe your knees or your ankles are uncomfortable in child pose, you can come onto your back and bring your knees in towards your chest, which is a lovely restful alternative. So perhaps a couple of breaths in the child pose if you're still that way around on your mat. And then getting ready for the relaxation. So you might want to grab a blanket or an extra layer of some kind. And this practice we've just done is really quite a nice bedtime one or evening one, and you could do, once you're familiar with the poses, you could do part of it. You could do just the lying on your back stuff, or just the child, cat, dog, and back to child. Helpful to think of the bones as a point of focus, and then followed by a bit of relaxation. It would be a really nice kind of later evening yoga routine. So one of the main things to avoid later in the evening, if you're concerned about your sleeping patterns, is strong back bends, backward bends. So forward bends are more relaxing and less energizing, so they're great to do a lot of. And also avoiding anything that's really getting your heart rate up very much, because it will kind of keep you activated for a while after. So energetic stuff during the day is great, like walking, cycling, dancing, running during the day, but then come the evening, this kind of soothing yoga is much better to help you sleep. So as you start to settle, you can again think of your bones and the connection with the ground. Be aware of your bones and the connection with the ground. I'm going to start the relaxation with another poem. So last week we had a poem about letting go, and this one is more about the bones and weightiness. And it's by an American poet called Brooke McNamara, and she's got a lovely poetry book out which you can order online called Feed Your Vows. So just a little shout out to Brooke, because she's been very inspiring in terms of poetry from my classes. And it's called Break. Coming to resting. Maybe there's something else that you want to do to make sure you are as comfortable as you can be. And settling and listening to break. Rest now. Let the weight you run from every day now draw you down. Later, there will be time to tend to everything left undone. Now rest. Fall into your own bones, lying horizontal on this bed. Come into your dark corners. Come into this original nakedness under all the layers. Don't rise yet. Rest. Don't rise yet. Rest. Let the weight you run from every day draw you down. Fall into your own bones. Emphasizing this letting go of the weight of your own body, letting gravity hold you, the earth from underneath supporting you, perhaps the gentle weight of a blanket, like gravity, very gently holding you in place, hugging you close to the earth, or your bed, or whatever you're lying on. And you can become aware of your eyes, resting in your eye sockets, feeling the bone structure of your eye sockets, and how your eyes can just rest back, covered by your eyelids. Noticing the patterns you can see behind your closed eyes. Maybe there are colors, shapes. Being aware of the bones of your chest gently rising and falling, your collarbones, your breastbone, space between the ribs. And then the softness of your belly where there are no bones. No bones in the front of the belly. Between the ribs and the pelvis, there's only the lumbar spine. Feeling how easily the lungs move down into the soft space of the abdomen. And then the floor of the pelvis, flanked by your hips. And aware of your limbs, the weight of your limbs, your arms, your legs. The fine bones of your feet and your hands. Everything resting. And for the next 3 or 4 out breaths, seeing if you can let go a little bit more into the weight of your own body, falling into your own bones. Noticing the softness at the front of your body again. And perhaps moving the little bones first, your fingers, your toes. If you don't want to move yet, but you'd like to stay where you are, that's fine too. You can stay there for as long as you like, or as long as you can. And otherwise, bring yourself round gently.